Welcome in, everybody. Get ready for a deep dive into Endurance Technologies Limited. We're going to be taking a look behind the scenes of their February 2025 corporate presentation. And let me tell you, this is not your typical company overview. This is a company that's a real powerhouse in the automotive components industry. And they're not just surviving in a world that's shifting towards electric vehicles. They are absolutely thriving.
It is really fascinating how Endurance, being an Indian company, has become a global player.
Yeah.
And they're not just supplying parts, they're really at the forefront of innovation. They're strategically positioning themselves, for success in this new world.
Okay, so let's break this down a little bit. Endurance was founded way back in 1985, and they've become the top dog when it comes to aluminum die casting in India. They're a major supplier to any company that makes two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, but they're not content with just, staying where they are.
Exactly. They're looking ahead to the future, and they see that the automotive industry is becoming more and more electrical. Endurance understands that this shift is a huge opportunity, and they're not going to miss out.
And they're not just dipping their toes in the water here. Their goal is to have 10% of their turnover come from EVs by 2028. And they've already secured a ton of orders from EV manufacturers both in India and in Europe. So that's a pretty clear sign that they're serious about this, and I think it's a really smart move.
It is a smart move. But to really understand how big their ambitions are, we need to zoom out a bit and look at their global reach. They've made some really strategic acquisitions in Europe. They've solidified their presence with companies like Endurance Overseas Seppier in Italy and Endurance GmbH in Germany.
So they're playing on an international field now, and they're not just relying on acquisitions for growth, they're also expanding their aftermarket business, particularly in Europe. What's interesting about the aftermarket is that it often has these higher margin products, and they sell directly to consumers, which means more profit for Endurance.
Yeah, it's a really savvy strategy. But they haven't forgotten where they came from. Endurance also has a strong aftermarket network in India, and that brought in a solid 5.3% of their revenue in fiscal year 2024. And they're looking to grow that segment even further, especially in South India.
Growth on multiple fronts, and it's not just about getting bigger. Their financial performance is seriously impressive. They've been consistently outperforming the industry. They have what's called a deleveraged balance sheet, which basically means they've been paying down their debt, which makes them less vulnerable to any economic ups and downs. It's like they're building a stronger foundation for their future. They've also earned improved credit ratings, which is always a good sign.
For sure. Their revenue in fiscal year 2024 was a huge 103,265 million Indian rupees with a healthy profit margin of 6.6%. So these numbers really show a company that's not just growing, but they're growing in a sustainable way.
All right, let's dive into what they actually make. Their product portfolio is surprisingly diverse. They make everything from suspension and braking systems to transmission components. And of course, their bread and butter aluminum die casting. But what really caught my eye was that they're moving into some really cutting-edge areas like embedded electronics for battery management systems. That's a crucial component for EVs.
Yeah, and that really highlights their commitment to research and development. They have 5 DSIR-approved R&D facilities in India.
Yeah.
Now, when we say DSIR-approved, that means these facilities have been vetted by the Indian government's Department of Scientific and Industrial Research. So that's a real stamp of approval for their scientific rigor and their innovation. Plus, they have 2 tech centers in Italy. So they're clearly dedicated to staying ahead of the curve on a global scale.
So they're not just manufacturing, they're really innovating and trying to stay ahead of what's next, which is the sign of a company that's thinking long-term. And speaking of thinking long-term, they're also really committed to sustainability. They're focused on reducing waste, conserving water, using renewable energy. They've even set some ambitious carbon neutrality goals.
Yeah. It's commendable how they've integrated sustainability into everything they do. It's not just an afterthought, it's woven into the fabric of their business. And they're going beyond just environmental sustainability. They're also really engaged in community development. So they're supporting education, healthcare, livelihood programs.
They're thinking about the well-being of the people in their communities, not just profits, which is really nice to see. But let's zoom back in on their growth strategy. They're aiming to really change their revenue breakdown by 2030. Their goal is to have 45% of their revenue come from four-wheelers, electric vehicles, and the aftermarket. That's up from just 26% in fiscal year 2024.
That's a really bold target, and it shows just how ambitious they are to become a leader in these high-growth areas. They're actively partnering with new electric vehicle OEMs, which means they're not waiting around for the EV wave to come to them. They're going out and meeting it head on.
And they're not limiting themselves geographically either. They're expanding into new markets, both in India and internationally. So they're definitely thinking big and acting strategically.
Another key part of their strategy is their focus on high-end technologies. Think Advanced electronics, sophisticated braking systems, lightweight materials, the kinds of things that are going to drive the future of the automotive industry.
So they're investing in the technologies that will define the future of transportation. And that proactive approach is really evident in their product and portfolio, which already includes EV-specific components. They get it. They understand that the future of transportation is electric, and they want to be a part of it.
Absolutely. And don't forget about their global footprint. Remember those 31 plants across India and Europe? That's not just manufacturing capacity. That's a sign that they're committed to serving customers all over the world. They're not just a local player, they're a global force.
It's amazing how they've been able to combine a deep understanding of the Indian market with a strategic vision for global expansion. They're definitely a company to watch, but there's so much more to their story, especially when it comes to their impressive market share and the details of their financial performance.
You're right, we've only scratched the surface. Let's dig into those details next to really understand how they've achieved such remarkable success. Welcome back. We've talked about Endurance's global ambitions, but let's not forget how they've climbed to the top in their home market of India. Their market share in key product categories is really something else.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me the numbers. What kind of dominance are we talking about here?
Well, in India, they have a huge 56% market share in aluminum die casting for two-wheelers, and that includes those stylish alloy wheels you see everywhere. They're also a major player in two-wheeler brakes and suspensions, with a 41% share in both of those.
Wow, those are some serious numbers. That kind of market share gives them so much leverage with suppliers and the ability to really influence pricing. It's the kind of stability that would make any investor sleep well at night. But they're not just sticking to what they know, are they?
Not at all. When it comes to newer technologies like transmissions, anti-lock braking systems, ABS, and drive shafts, they're going head-to-head with some big multinational companies.
And I bet they're holding their own. But let's shift gears for a minute and talk about their financials. We touched on their revenue, but I'm curious about their profitability and how they've managed their debt.
Hmm.
A company can grow really fast, but still be drowning in debt.
That's a great point. And that's where their financial strategy really shines. They've been very diligent about paying down their debt. It's like they're clearing the clutter to make way for new opportunities. And that's earned them improved credit ratings from agencies like CRISIL and ICRA. They've got an AA plus stable rating for long-term debt and an A1 plus rating for short-term debt. That's like getting a gold star from the financial world.
That's definitely a sign of financial health. It sounds like they're playing the long game, building a sustainable business for the future. But let's not forget about the people behind the numbers. How has their workforce contributed to all this success?
Well, they clearly recognize that a company's only as good as its people. They really emphasize employee productivity. In fiscal year 2024, their revenue per full-time employee was a remarkable 14.1 million Indian rupees. That tells you their workforce is efficient, skilled, and contributing a lot to the company's bottom line.
That's impressive. And it sounds like they're not afraid to invest in growth either. Their presentation highlighted their commitment to capital efficiency, which basically means they're making sure that every rupee they spend is working hard for them. This includes expanding into those higher value products and diversifying their offerings.
Yeah, they're pursuing what we call a profitable growth strategy. It's not just about getting bigger, it's about getting better. And that involves things like increasing machining automation for those high-value products, which makes them more efficient and lowers their costs. They're also exploring new materials, new technologies, and even investing in larger die casting machines that can handle more complex parts.
It's like they're constantly leveling up, looking for ways to improve and stay ahead of the curve. Now, I'm really intrigued by their aftermarket business. It seems like a bit of a hidden gem within their overall operations. The kind of thing that might surprise people who don't follow the industry that closely.
It's definitely a big part of their story, and one that shouldn't be overlooked. Their aftermarket presence, especially in the two-wheeler segment, is built around those high-margin products and a direct-to-consumer approach. And that cuts out the middleman and lets them keep a bigger share of the profit.
It's a classic strategy, but it clearly works. But how are they reaching those customers? Are we talking brick-and-mortar stores, online platforms, or something else entirely?
They've built this really strong distribution network with 6 company-run centers in India and a mind-blowing 376 distributors and dealers all across the country. And they haven't neglected the international market either. They have 60 distributors overseas spanning 39 countries.
Wow, that's a truly global network. It sounds like they're really serious about growing this part of their business. What's their game plan for expanding the aftermarket?
Well, they're focusing on a few key things. First, they're really working to increase their brand visibility and build customer loyalty through some targeted branding programs. Think of it like creating a strong brand identity That really resonates with people. Second, they're expanding their distribution network even further, especially in South India, where they see a lot of potential.
Makes sense to tap into those growing markets, but they're also looking beyond India's borders, right? Are they trying to replicate this strategy internationally?
Absolutely. They're entering new countries every year, strategically aligning their expansion with the global footprint of their original equipment manufacturer, OEM partners. It's like they're riding the wave of their OEM customers' success into these new territories.
Smart move, leveraging those existing relationships to expand their reach. But it's not just about expanding geographically, they're also diversifying their product offerings within the aftermarket, right? Are they sticking to their core products or are they branching out?
Oh, they're definitely branching out. They're introducing products for newer vehicle models, keeping pace with the latest trends. And they're even venturing into trading of two-wheeler and three-wheeler auto parts that they don't actually manufacture themselves.
Huh.
This lets them offer a more complete range of products, becoming a one-stop shop for their customers.
It's like they're building an ecosystem around those core offerings. But let's change gears again and talk about their sustainability efforts. We talked about their carbon neutrality goals before, but I'd love to hear more about the specifics. It seems like they're going above and beyond what you'd normally see from a company their size.
What's really impressive is their holistic approach. They haven't just slapped a sustainability label on a few things. They've made it a central part of how they do business.
Yeah.
They've identified 5 key pillars: governance, social responsibility, operations, people, and the environment. And each pillar has its own set of initiatives and targets. So it's a really comprehensive and well thought out commitment.
Okay, so walk me through some of these initiatives. What are they actually doing in each of these areas? What does this commitment look like in action?
So in terms of governance, they're all about ethical business practices,
Yeah.
robust review mechanisms, and sticking to the highest standards of corporate governance. It's really the foundation of any sustainable business. You need to have that strong ethical framework in place.
Yeah, that's the bedrock for sure. But what about their social impact? What are they doing to give back to the communities where they operate?
They've got all these community development programs focusing on education, healthcare, sanitation, and creating jobs.
Yeah.
They're investing in the well-being of their communities because they understand that a company's success is tied to the health and prosperity of the people around them.
So it sounds like they're being proactive, not just reacting to problems after they pop up. What really stood out to you in their social responsibility initiatives? Were there any specific programs that you thought were particularly impactful?
Well, their commitment to education is really inspiring. They've renovated tons of schools, giving them resources and infrastructure that they desperately needed. They've also installed solar energy units and clean drinking water facilities, which directly improves the lives of the students and teachers. And their efforts to empower people through computer literacy programs are amazing. They've equipped thousands of people with skills that are so valuable in today's world.
It's incredible how they're addressing such a wide range of needs in their communities. Now, what about their healthcare initiatives? You mentioned they're involved in this area too. What's that like on the ground?
Their healthcare programs are equally impressive. They organize regular health camps, bringing medical services to people who might not have easy access to them. They also offer veterinary services because they recognize how important animal health is in these communities. And they support government healthcare facilities, helping to strengthen the systems that are already in place.
It's a really well-rounded approach to community development, taking care of both people and animals. It sounds like they're really making a difference. Now let's get back to the environment. We've talked about their carbon neutrality goals, but what are the concrete steps they're taking to reach them? Are they just setting targets, or are they actually doing things differently?
They're definitely not just talking about it. They're taking action to reduce their impact on the environment.
Yeah.
They're working to lower their carbon emissions, their water consumption, and the amount of waste they produce. They're walking the walk.
Okay, so what are some of the things they're doing? How are they actually putting these goals into practice?
They're doing a bunch of things. They've started using renewable energy sources like solar and wind power, so they're not as reliant on fossil fuels. They've also implemented energy-efficient technologies in their facilities, so they're using less energy overall. And they've got really solid waste management and recycling programs to minimize how much waste they send to landfills. They're even doing things like rainwater harvesting to conserve water. It's a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah. It's inspiring to see a company take such a proactive and thorough approach to sustainability. It's not just about following the rules, it's about genuinely trying to minimize their footprint. But let's not forget about their employees. We talked about how productive they are, but what are they doing to create a positive and supportive work environment? After all, happy employees are usually productive employees.
They seem to get that.
Yeah.
They've created a workplace culture that's all about teamwork, open communication, and always looking for ways to improve. They also really prioritize employee health and safety with comprehensive training programs and strict safety protocols in place.
So it sounds like they're really investing in their employees' well-being. They understand that a safe and supportive environment is essential for everyone to succeed. But what about diversity and inclusion? Are they doing anything to create a more inclusive workplace? It's 2025, companies really need to be thinking about these things.
Oh yeah, they specifically say that celebrating diversity is a strategic priority for them. They believe that a diverse workforce brings more perspectives to the table, which leads to more creativity, better decision-making, and ultimately more innovation. They've put initiatives in place to promote gender diversity and create a more welcoming and inclusive environment for everyone, no matter who they are or where they come from.
That's great to hear. It's so important for companies to be intentional about building workplaces where everyone feels valued and respected. But are they just saying all the right things, or are they actually getting results?
They're definitely walking the walk.
Mm.
They've won a bunch of awards and recognition for their efforts in these areas.
Mm.
They've been recognized for their sustainability practices, their employee engagement programs, and their commitment to innovation. So it seems like people are noticing what they're doing, both within the industry and outside of it.
Wow. It's clear that Endurance Technologies Limited is really putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to sustainability, social responsibility, and employee well-being. They're not just chasing profits, they're building a business that benefits their employees, their communities, and the environment. It's really refreshing to see a company that's taking such a holistic approach, especially when you hear so many stories about companies putting short-term gains ahead of long-term sustainability.
It really is. It's a great example of how businesses can be successful while also making a positive impact on the world. But there's one more really interesting part of their story that we need to explore: their strategic acquisitions and how those have shaped their global presence. Those acquisitions have been so important to their growth, and it's really interesting to see how they've thought about them strategically.
You're right. Those acquisitions have been key to their journey, adding new layers and dimensions to their story. Let's dive into that next and explore how they've used these acquisitions to expand their reach, diversify what they offer, and strengthen their position in the global market.
Okay, so we're back and ready to trace the path of Endurance Technologies Limited through their strategic acquisitions. It's like watching someone play chess on a global scale. Each move, each acquisition is adding a new layer of strength to their position.
And what's really interesting is that they haven't just used these acquisitions to grow geographically. They've also used them to diversify what they offer and to really boost their technology. So it's like a multi-pronged approach to getting bigger and better.
So let's go back to the beginning. Where did this global chess game start? What was their first big move?
Well, their first big step outside of India was back in 2007 when they acquired this company called Amann Druckes GmbH in Germany. It's known as Endurance GmbH now. And this was their entry into the European market. It gave them a foothold in the aluminum die casting segment, which is a really high-value area. That was a bold move going right into the heart of the European auto industry. So what did they do next?
The next year, they set up Endurance Overseas Schroll in Italy. This was kind of like a special purpose vehicle specifically for making more investments overseas. It's like they were setting up a base camp for their European expansion. And this became the starting point for a bunch of acquisitions in Italy. They were targeting companies that specialized in all sorts of automotive components, from suspension and braking systems to transmission parts and even these high-tech plastic parts.
So they were on a roll. It sounds like they had a really clear plan for what they wanted to achieve in Europe.
Yeah, they were very systematically building up their presence in the European market. They acquired companies like Fondelmec, FOA, and Granaskroll. All of these companies had a lot of expertise in very specific areas, and these acquisitions let Endurance quickly expand their product range and tap into all these existing customer relationships in Europe. It's like they were putting together this all-star team of automotive component makers.
But it wasn't just about buying up companies, right? They were also focused on quality and bringing in technological expertise that would really give them an advantage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In 2013, they acquired a majority stake in Adler SPA, an Italian company that specializes in clutch assemblies and these continuously variable transmissions. And that acquisition was huge. It really boosted their transmission technology capabilities, and it opened doors to new customers who were looking for those more advanced solutions. So it wasn't just about getting bigger, it was about becoming a leader in technology.
So they were moving beyond just being a part supplier. They wanted to be seen as innovators, bringing new technology to the table. Were there any other acquisitions that were especially important?
One of their more recent ones in 2022 was a majority stake in Maxwell Energy Systems Private Limited. This was an Indian company that specialized in embedded electronics for battery management systems. And that was a strategic move to get ready for the electric vehicle revolution. They were already thinking ahead to what the market would need.
There's that EV connection. They were getting ready for that wave. So what does all of this tell us about their overall ambitions? What does their acquisition strategy reveal?
It shows that they don't just want to be a big player in one region. They have global goals, and they're actively looking for opportunities to expand what they can do and where they can do it. They're not afraid to make big moves and to invest in companies that fit into their long-term strategy. They're in it for the long haul, and they're doing it in the smart way.
And it's not like they're just buying these companies and letting them do their own thing. They're integrating them into their existing operations. They've built a truly global network of manufacturing and R&D facilities, and it's all working together to drive innovation and make high-quality products for their customers all over the world.
And their success really comes down to their ability to find the right companies to buy, make those acquisitions happen smoothly, and then blend those new companies into their existing structure. This disciplined approach is how they've managed to stay financially strong while growing so quickly. It really shows how strategic they are.
It's a pretty amazing story. They started as a small company in India, and now they're a global leader in automotive components. They've proven that with a clear vision, a good plan, and a dedication to innovation, anything is possible. Their story is a real example of how to build a global business from scratch.
And their story's not over yet. The automotive industry is changing fast with things like electric vehicles, automation, and connectivity. And Endurance is in a great spot to play a big part in shaping the future of mobility. They're not just going along for the ride, they're helping to steer.
So what does this all mean for you? Well, if you're looking for a company that's not just keeping up with change, but actually leading the way, Endurance Technologies Limited is worth keeping an eye on. They're a great example of how a company can be successful while also doing good in the world.
As we wrap up this look at Endurance Technologies Limited, here's something to think about. How will they use all their knowledge about traditional car parts to become a big player in the EV market? Will those early investments in EV technology pay off? The answers might be in how they keep focusing on research and development, how they build partnerships, and how well they can adapt in this fast-changing market.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Endurance Technologies Limited. It's been a great journey. We've seen how they started small and grew into a company with global ambitions. We've talked about their financial success and their commitment to doing business the right way. It's a story of innovation, strategic growth, and a company that's ready for whatever comes next. So until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those wheels turning.